So we're going to start with Vayechi. And remember, for those of you, we didn't have a class on Joseph and what happens when he's reunited with his brothers, but we'll bring a little bit of that in when we discuss what's going on in this Torah portion. So Jacob and his 12 sons and their wives end up living in Mitzrayim. There's a hunger, they come down, and the ganze mishpacha is reunited. Now, Yosef is still viceroy of Egypt. You know, they are the family of second in command to the, what we would call the president or the prime minister under the king in Egypt. So imagine that, true royalty. And what ends up happening is Yaakov realizes now that he's getting old, he's ill, and he's going to die. So he has to say his goodbyes. He has to say his goodbyes. So I want to start off not at the beginning of the story, but a little bit further into the story. And I'm going to go back to the beginning because the beginning has a more of a, I want to end off with rather the beginning than the end, but I want to start off with this, where he calls all of the 12 sons over to bless each one and say goodbye. And something very interesting happens. I want to read it to you. Gather around, he tells his sons, so I could tell you what will happen to you in days to come. In other words, gather around, I'm going to tell you the future. And then he ends off his sentence and he says, assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. But he doesn't end off in saying again, I will tell you what will happen in days to come. You notice the sentence is broken off in two. He says, gather around, I want to tell you the future. Then he says, come and listen to your father. But he doesn't say again, yeah, guess what? I'm going to tell you the future. So first of all, why the repetition of the passage? And why, if he's repeating his sentence for emphasis, right, he should say, gather around, I'm going to tell you the future. Okay, guys, come over here. You want to hear the future? I'm going to tell it to you. The reason is, Rashi jumps in and says, because his divine prophecy at that moment was taken away from him. He lost his divine prophecy. Remember, he was a prophet. God took it away from him. So what's his reaction? What would be your reaction? If at the moment you want to share with your children their future lives, and suddenly, boom, it was taken away, what would you think?
He wasn't supposed to do that.
Right, he wasn't supposed to share it.
He wasn't supposed to share it.
Right.
But also, even more than that, he's thinking, why was my divine prophecy taken away? Because something is wrong with my children. My children may not be as pious following in my footsteps. That's why they don't deserve to hear the future. But that's not so, because he calls out to them, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. He asks them, could this be that you are not one with me in belief in God and the ways of God? And the children respond, no, we are with you, Dad. There's not one of us who is swaying from the way, your way, which is monotheism, belief in God, and getting the future Torah mitzvahs. Remember, they kept Torah mitzvahs even though they didn't have to and they didn't have it yet. But through prophecy, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob gave over to their children, Bris, Kashrus, Shabbos, and all the mitzvahs that they practiced. But they were obligated to practice. So they said, no, God, no, Dad, there's not one of us who has deviated from the path of righteousness. So what does Yaakov respond to his sons? Baruch Shem Kavod Machusay L'Olam Vaed. Remember when you say Shema, Shema Yisrael, Hashem, Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and then you uncover your eyes and go, Baruch Shem Kavod Machusay L'Olam Vaed. And even in the Torah, it doesn't say that line. Why do we say it? Because this was Yaakov's response to his sons on his day, on his what we would call his deathbed, when he was passing away. So till this very day, when we say Baruch Shem Kavod Machusay L'Olam Vaed, It's reiterating what Jacob told his sons. How beautiful it is that every one of you, including my daughter Dinah, because there was 13 of them, believe in God and are following in my footsteps. So if this was not the case, where his sons were not liable, like, you know why God removed my divine prophecy? Because my children are not worthy, then what happened? What happened? Why do you think he didn't tell them the future? If it was not a matter that they were not righteous and not deserving of hearing, why didn't they hear it? So like Jane and Margaret, you said God didn't want them to hear it. God does not want us to know our future. God does not want us to be able to know, for example, the Torah says God does not tell us the day of our death, the day we're going to die. Why? Because which person can live a life knowing on December 1st, 2028, they're going to pass away? You'll be so worried, obsessed, and anxious, you won't be able to live your life. That's one example. But there's even another reason. Does anybody want to know why? Why don't we know our future? Maybe we should be able to plan ahead. And if we know what's going to happen, we can circumvent it, right? If you know you're going to be in a car crash, you'll drive slower. Maybe you won't drive that day. You'll circumvent tragedy. You'll circumvent.
Well, we still have free will.
Free will.
Yeah, free will.
Excellent. Exactly what the commentators and Kabbalah says. Because by giving us a prediction of our future, what might be saying is this is it and that's it. Which means we don't have free choice. It's not my fault this happened. What's the word? Predetermined. Very good. Thank you. Predetermined. But we have free choice. And I want to share a little insight. You know, like all the Greek tragedies, right? That all happened. It's all about, there was predictions, there was an oracle. There's a story I want to share with you because it just gives you, remember the story with Laius? Laius was a king and he had an oracle, a prophet, of course, a fake prophet who told him a son will be born to you and he will kill you. So when his son was born, it's a little bit horrible, but he took the baby and he nailed his feet to a stone and he left him in the wilderness to die. A shepherd came back around, saw this terrible suffering, released the infant, and the infant was later raised by the queen of Corinth. But he was called Oedipus because he had crippled feet, hurt feet. Good morning, Eva. He had something wrong with his feet. So this was a prediction that has resulted in tragedy. So the Greeks believed very much in predictions and oracles. Remember, you know, their lives depended on these future fortune tellers, astrologers who would tell them. Remember, Paro had a dream and his astrologer said there will be a young boy born and he's going to usurp him. And it did happen, Moshe. So I saw very interesting tidbits from Sir Jonathan Sacks. Remember the the chief rabbi of England of blessed memory. He said, when a prediction comes true, it's wonderful. But when a prophecy comes true, it's a tragedy. He says it's terrible. Why? He's referring to when the prophets would be sent by God to warn the Jewish people that if they don't repent, there'll be destruction of the temple. They'll be exiled from the land of Israel. So when a prophecy comes true, we cry because it means we didn't listen and we didn't change in a sense, what would be. So when the weatherman predicts a storm and it's true, everybody goes, wow, this is amazing. But when a negative prophecy, because there's also positive prophecies, we cry because that means that we didn't listen. But now let me sum up because we can go on and on. It's very interesting because I want to read this to you, that in Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, right, we say Unasana Tokef, one of the most powerful prayers. And what does it say there? We say on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, it is written, and on Yom Kippur, it is sealed. who will live and who will die, etc., etc. But what's the last line in that prayer? Tshuva, repentance, tefillah, prayer, tzedakah, charity can avert the decree. In other words, this sums up why God didn't give Yaakov the ability to tell the future. Because even when there's a decree from God, this person is going to die on this and this day, Tshuva, Tefillah, and Tzedakah can avert and change even that which is sealed on Yom Kippur in the book of life. So Jews in general, God says free choice is even on such a high level for us, for humanity, that even when there is a decree, you'll say, well, it was a decree. God says it happens. No. It could be changed through prayer, acts of goodness, charity, repentance. That's how powerful our free choice is. So we can never blame life on this was decreed. Now, at the end of the day, what has to happen sometimes happens no matter what, and we don't always know why. But we cannot fall into the rut of thinking that we are not able, in a sense, to change our destiny. And this is a very, very powerful thing we have to always remember, because we tend to always think sometimes, what could I do? What could I do? You could always try to do something. And if God doesn't want to accept, and at the end of the day, the seemingly negative consequences, I say seemingly because, everything's for the good. At the end of the day, you've done everything you can, but not to try, not to attempt to avert the decree or change your destiny. Jews believe very powerfully in our ability to change even the most harsh, engraved decree in our lives. The story, I told this, I'll share it again. Tell me if you heard it and you remember it, then I won't go into the details. Remember the story with Rabbi Akiva's daughter? Anybody remember the story? It was her wedding morning. And she got up in the morning and she started to scream. And all the servants came in. Remember, they were a very wealthy family. And they saw above her headboard, her hairpin had killed a poisonous snake, had struck the eye of the snake. Remember the story? So her father comes running in and he sees, wow, this is unbelievable. Her hairpin at night, obviously when she went to bed, she didn't realize even, it's dark. She took out her hairpin, she stuck it in the, people kept their hairpin in the wall, and she inadvertently killed this poisonous snake. So quietly, her father says, daughter, Tachterl, tell me what happened yesterday in your life. She says, nothing really. He says, no, I want to hear. She says, well, I went into the kitchen yesterday and the chef was preparing the wedding feast. And a poor man was at the door and he was chasing him away. The poor man was asking for food and he said, you want food? Come tomorrow. There'll be the wedding feast. There'll be a table for the poor. In those days, they would always put out a table for the poor people to join in the wedding. That was especially Rabbi Akiva. So she says to the chef, no. He can't wait till tomorrow. Please prepare for him a platter of food. Fine. So her father gave her a hug. And what happened was when Rabbi Akiva was a young father and his wife was pregnant, he met a prophet. And the prophet said, your daughter, I saw on the stars, your daughter will die on her wedding day. And when Rabbi Akiva heard this, he shook like a leaf, but he never told anybody. Because again, we don't believe that some prophet says he saw it in the stars. So this is what we see, tzedakah saved her life. She gave to the poor the day before her wedding, and look what happened. She averted her own tragedy, in a sense, what could happen to her. And so Rabbi Akiva didn't tell his daughter. He didn't surround her with guards the night of the wedding. Oh my gosh, I remember the guy told me in the stars, because Rabbi Akiva knew we as Jews or any human being should not believe in predictions, fortune tellers, palm readers, astrologers, omens. It's against Jewish law, for example, to go to a fortune teller I saw it in the cards. I saw it in your palm. I saw it in the crystal ball. A little Yiddish boy goes with his Bubba to a seance because she misses Zayda so much. She says, Yankele, we're going to a seance. I want to talk to Zayda. I heard there's a lady who communicates with the dead. So she takes her grandson and they go, and the fortune teller takes out the crystal ball and she dims the light. And she says, yes, your husband Feivel is with us. And she says, so ask Feivel, what did he do with all our savings money? I can't seem to find it. And Feivel says, yeah, it's in the bank account, Bank of America. Wow, I didn't know. And she says, ask Feivel, what happened to that beautiful gold watch he used to own? Well, I pawned it off to pay the mortgage. And the Bubba is so excited. She's speaking to her husband, Feivel, and Feivel, I miss you so much. And he says, and I miss you so much. And they leave. And she says, Yankele, wasn't it great hearing Zayda's voice? He says, yeah, Bubby, but I don't remember that Zayda ever spoke English. So we can't go to fortune tellers and define our future. We have free choice, and we are actually captains of our destiny in a sense. We are captains in our destiny, So that's how we have to approach life. Don't predict the future. I mean, you could try to predict the future and say, I'm going to one day be the most successful. I'm going to one day be the greatest achiever, but don't rule your life by anticipating what will be your end of days, so to speak, because it doesn't allow people to move forward. This is what I think this lesson in this Rashi and this part of the story. Does anybody want to add anything or say anything about this? Okay, wonderful. So now I want to go back to the beginning of the Torah portion where, Yaakov is passing away. He gathers his children, but before he gathers his children, his son Joseph, remember the famous Joseph, who has now 2 children with Asnat. Remember the story, the Cinderella story, how Dinah is pregnant with a girl, daughter Asnat, from being violated by Shechem. And Asnat is an outcast in Israel with the family because everyone knows how she was conceived. So Yaakov gives her a special bracelet that's engraved that she is from the family of Yaakov. And he sends her to live in Egypt. Everybody remember the story. And when Joseph becomes viceroy of Egypt, there's a ticker tape parade. And his chariot is going through the streets. And every girl wants to marry this handsome, wealthy prime minister, second in command. Everyone knows he's an eligible bachelor. And Asnat throws her bracelet onto the chariot too, and everyone's throwing jewelry and scarves. And when Yosef comes back to his palace and they lay out the booty, he sees a bracelet with Hebrew letters that this and this person is from the family of Yaakov. So he says, find me this woman, this girl, because he will only marry someone from his family, right? He's a believer in God, a believer in Torah. And he marries Asnat. Look at the story. She's an outcast. He's sold by his brothers. He's an outcast from his family. And together they have 2 beautiful children, Manasseh and Ephraim. 2 beautiful sons. And it's so beautiful to see that Joseph, who had every reason to give up belief in God, belief in his father, belief in everything he was taught. Look, you betrayed me. You sold me into slavery. And then I was put into prison by Potiphar's wife because she accused me of trying to, have intimacy with her. Remember the story? She tries to She tries to entice him and he runs away. She has his jacket. Say, look, he wanted to accost me. And he sits in prison and he's finally freed when he interprets Paro's dreams. Remember the whole story. He had every reason to say, they abandoned me. Why should I be loyal to the Jewish people? Why should I be loyal to my family? Look what they did to me. And yet he remains true to his family. He marries only Osnat because she's from that family, from his, what we call the Israelites. And when his brothers come to him, 3 times, what does he tell them? They finally figure out who he is. He says, I'm your brother. He says, Elokim shalachni. God sent me here. Don't take credit that because of you, I ended up here. You think it's because of you. You think because you were jealous and you sold me into slavery, that's why I ended up in Mitzrayim. No. I would have ended up here regardless. God wanted me here. This also is a lesson. I'm just reiterating because it's such a powerful thing where when you have anger and pain and somebody hurt you, this is called taking what we call what do you call it? The high
road.
road.
The high road.
If it was me, let's say a normal person, what would you, when you see your brothers after all the years? Anger, pain. He could have put them into prison. He was the viceroy. He says, don't take credit for your acts. God wanted me here. Elokim shalachni. 3 times he tells them, God wanted me here. That's why I'm here. So I have no grudge, anger, or resentment against you. Now, how does that speak for a person who suffered so greatly, sold into slavery, then put into prison because Potiphar's wife decided he's a criminal? 17 years old, he was sold into slavery. Wouldn't he be bitter, angry, resentful, in therapy? I never want to see any of you again. You think I'm going to give you food? You think I'm going to bring you here and give you wealth? Avec. He welcomes them with warmth and love and forgiveness, because he says, God sent me here. To me, it's so unimaginable. It's so easy to be angry and have grudge and resentment and blame the people that did it to you, and rightfully so. Would anyone say Joseph isn't right in being angry? Tell me, what do you think, girls? Yes, right?
Yeah, it seems more natural. I mean,
that shows you why Joseph is Joseph. Because Joseph lived in a different reality, a reality where he's so connected to God and to his soul, he realizes everything comes from God. That's why when he's in prison, it says Ish Matzliach. He was successful. Now, the ward didn't realize he was something special, so he kind of gave him freedom in the prison system. But how do you say a guy in a Egyptian prison is no cup of tea, trust me? Brittany Greener didn't suffer as much as Joseph in the prison system. But yet they call him Ish Matzliach because it's not about his confines. It's about how he lived his life. He lived in a different reality, a reality connected to God. So no matter where he is, he's Ish Matzliach. He's successful. He's victorious. And then he becomes viceroy of Egypt. He could have said, listen, I'm on top of my game. There's no one, I can't be the Paro. I'm second in command. Do I need Judaism? Do I need God? Do I need my family? Look what they did to me. He says, God sent me here. So now let's go back to the story. So Yosef, now we know who Yosef is, right? And remember one more thing which we discussed last time. It's so important to know. Why did they sell him into slavery? Really, they're jealous of a baby brother? Because he got a multicolored coat from daddy? Go to Loehmann's, go to Nordstrom, buy your own coat.
Right.
They were jealous of, it's not even jealous. Joseph was like Dinah and like Leah. Remember they said she was an outgoing girl? Joseph came from a different mindset. God created him to be a leader, to go out in the world and conquer the universe and bring godliness to the universe. He wasn't a regular guy like his brothers, a shepherd. For them, shepherding, living in the shtetl, living near a yeshiva, living near the day school, near the mikveh, near daddy and mommy, they needed that. But Yosef couldn't fulfill his destiny being a shepherd with his brothers in Shechem, in Israel. Yosef was given an energy and a power to conquer the world. And they didn't get that, so they ostracized him. When people are different, we shun them. What you think you're smarter than the Pope? My brother would always tell me, you're smarter than the Pope, you know better. People don't like people who are out of the box and don't think like them. Now we're talking all within the realm of Torah mitzvahs. We're not talking about a guy who decides ham is kosher. We're talking that he saw that his destiny was to conquer the universe with the light of God, imbue the light of the world, God's light in the world. He couldn't stay as a shepherd. That wasn't his destiny. They didn't get it, so they sold him. He can't be with us, they said. He doesn't get us. He's not like us. We don't think God wants that. That's not what Torah wants. Torah wants us. So even in the realm of Judaism, we have people who don't get other people. But look what happens to Yosef. He saves the world. He doesn't only save the Jews, he saves the world. There's no hunger because Egypt is now the source of food during the famine. Think about America now. If we had a Joseph who put away the oil and put away the natural resources and the gas, he saved the world. So that's Joseph's destiny. He can't be locked up in a little city and Joseph, there you'll fulfill God wants him to go out. And that's who Joseph is. So now Joseph brings his two sons, Manasseh, the older one, Ephraim, to the younger one, to daddy, their grandpa, to Zayda. Zayda is going to say his goodbyes. And there's a very powerful conversation going on here, very powerful conversation. Let me share what happens. So let me turn to the page. And it came to pass, and he took his sons with him, Manasseh and Ephraim. And Israel, which is Yaakov, is sitting upon his bed. And he starts talking and chatting, and he says to Yaakov, his son Yosef, something very powerful. He says, and when we came to Padan Aram, this is when, remember, they ran away from the father-in-law Lavan. Remember, Jacob was living with his father-in-law Lavan. It's time to leave. He took all of his kids and they traveled to Padan Aram. They returned back. They were heading back home to Israel with the 12 tribes, right? That's when the whole story with Dinah happened. She was accosted, she was kidnapped, and so on. So Yaakov is repeating to the story to Yosef when he was 9 years old, what happened? Remember, we were traveling, we came to Padan Aram, and he says, Mesa alai Rachel, your mother Rachel died on me. The Eretz Canaan, in the land of Canaan, on the way to Ephrat. And I buried her there, he says, on the way to Ephrat, which is in Beit Lechem. And he tells this to his son Yosef. He's saying to his son Yosef, he's reviewing what happened with his mother. Now remember, Rachel died in childbirth, right? She gave birth to Benjamin, the youngest of the 12 tribes. And as she's giving birth, the baby is born and she says her goodbyes and she passes away. And where does he bury her? He's telling his son Joseph, remember where we buried Mama? We buried her in Beit Lechem, which is now called Kever Rachel. Remember, it's a special house. Rachel is buried. Where's everyone else buried? Where's Jacob buried? Abraham, Sarah, where? The cave of Machpelah in Hebron. Remember the double cave? Adam and Chava are buried there, Adam and Eve. Avram and Sarah are buried there. Yitzchak, Isaac, and Rebekah are buried there. And Jacob and Leah are buried there. Okay? Who's not buried there? Rachel. Rachel is buried alone in Beit Lechem, Cave of Rachel, on the right when you're about at the very edge of Israel, when you're about to leave, that's where she is. The tombstone of Rachel, Mama Rachel, as we call her. So he's telling his son Joseph the story of what happened. Now, why do you think he's telling his son Joseph the story now? Why is he discussing with him the death of the mother? Didn't they discuss it already before? What happened? Does he have to really tell? Didn't Yosef say to him, Dad, why did you bury Mama in Beit Lechem and not with in the Ma'orat HaMachpelah, where all the other matriarchs and patriarchs are buried? Remember, Yaakov wasn't buried there yet. Why didn't you bury Mama there where you were going to be buried? Didn't they have this discussion years ago when they got reunited in Egypt? Or maybe when he was 9 years old when it actually happened? Why is he going through the whole story now of burying Mama in Beit Lechem? What do you think? What's your idea? Why is he bringing it up now on the deathbed, his own deathbed?
Maybe for the grandchildren.
Okay. That's true. Maybe he wants the grandchildren to hear.
Maybe that Joseph is probably going to be buried separately from the rest of the family too.
He is. Remember the tomb of Joseph, and when the Arab nations got hold of the tomb as the negotiations, they desecrated the whole tomb of Joseph, which was horrible. Where does Jacob ask his children to bury him when he dies? Is he going to be buried in Egypt? Where is he going to be buried? In the cave of Machpelah. After Yaakov dies, now when he's sitting with his sons, he says, children, promise me you're going to bury me in Israel. And they take him to the land of Israel after he passes away in this Torah portion, and they bury him in the Ma'orat HaMachpelah. So Yaakov is asking Joseph and his brothers, bury me in the Ma'orat HaMachpelah. So they think he might be thinking, Joseph might say to the brothers, no, he didn't bury my mother there. I don't want him buried there. Tit for tat. Do you think he might be thinking that? But doesn't he know his son Joseph is not a vengeful person?
Why didn't he want to be buried with Rachel?
I'll tell you why in a minute. That's what we're getting to.
Okay.
Very good. So he tells his sons to bury him in the Ma'orat HaMachpelah. That we know. So let's first go to do, like we say, the pshat. We're walking in now to the garden. Remember we talked about the garden. There's the regular explanation. So the commentaries say a few things. Why indeed did he bury Rachel in Beit Lechem? So Rambam says he was traveling with a huge entourage. Remember? He had cattle and he had servants and he had children and he had grandchildren and he had wives, their wives. He has a huge entourage. So even though he was only a half a day away from the Ma'orat HaMachpelah at the time when Rachel died, Beit Lechem was right there, and a half a day, one person traveling on a camel and a horse with a whole entourage is a month or a few weeks. So the Ramban says convenience. To get to Ma'orat HaMachpelah Chevron would take much longer. He doesn't have embalmment material to keep her preserved. So Beit Lechem was the rational, logical choice at the time. So he buries her in Beis Lechem. That's the Ramban. The Sepharna takes it one step further. It says, Meis alai Rachel. Rachel died on me. What does that mean? She died in his arms. She died on top of him. She fell on him. So Sepharna says, Meis alai Rachel means that who feels the grief the greatest? Alai, the husband. Meis alai, she died on me. Me, the husband, felt the greatest grief, pain, and emotional trauma. My mindset was not of, okay, let me go to Ma'orat HaMachpelah. My mindset is, let me do the best I could at that time. You know, when a person has so much anguish, sometimes they don't make the most rational, practical, they make maybe the most practical decision, but not thinking. So Freida says, he went through so much stress and anguish, Beit Lechem seemed the easiest at that time to accomplish, to bury his wife properly. That's what the Sepharna says. The grief was so great. This is how he dealt with it. He buried her to the best of his ability. Can you blame him? Later on, you say, oh, why didn't you bury her in Montefiore Cemetery? Why didn't you bury her near Grandma Zelda? When a person is going through grief, they don't always think the way, oh my gosh, yeah, that's how I should do it, right? It's very common sense, this answer. But of course, we're never going to be happy with this, are we? No. But it's interesting to know that it tells us Mei Salai means that who feels the grief the greatest? The husband. And lastly, the Ibn Ezra, another great commentary, says she died suddenly. Mei Saleh means she suddenly died. He didn't know she was going to die in childbirth. The baby is born, he's holding a screaming baby, and the wife passes away. So that's why he buried her right then and there. What else do you expect him to do? He's overwhelmed. So she died suddenly. This is why they buried her. No. Okay, so if you know what, we could be happy with all these explanations, right? Do they make sense? They make sense.
Yeah.
Right? They make sense. But we do know that there's a much deeper, greater reason. So Rashi, by the way, who's usually the more practical approach, comes to us with the most philosophical, beautiful answer, which we all know. We discussed this many times, so it's not going to be a shocker. But this is what Rashi says. I want to share it for you. Hold on. This is what he says. Rashi says, why was he discussing this with Yosef now? Because although Yosef is the most dignified, unvengeful, kind person, and would never for a moment fault his father, he realized there's also something called emotional feelings. Yes, Yosef would bury his father in Israel. He would never think not to. But Yaakov is brilliant, remember. He realizes, how could Yosef not feel some emotional pain that his mother was not buried in Hebron? Yaakov is looking at his son. He's passing away, right? He realizes his son is now 50-something years old. 39 when he met Yaakov there. He's like 50-something years old. Yaakov is 147 years old. And he realizes there has to be some emotional pain that Yosef is harboring. He's not a statue. He's not a god. He feels. So he's explaining to Yosef, he wants to put to rest something very important that Yosef has to know. And this is what he tells him. Rashi says, and I know that you have a complaint in your heart against me. However, now I'll tell you why I buried Mama there. It was the word of God that I buried her there, that she might be of aid to her children when Nebuchadnezzar exiles them from Israel, remember, with the destruction of the temple, and they pass by there. Right. There would be Rachel, who would come out from her grave crying and beseech God for mercy, as it says, that a voice is heard, and the Holy One, blessed be He, says, there is a reward for thy work, and thy children shall return to their own border. Rachel mevakeh al baneha, the famous statement. So let's repeat what Yaakov tells Yosef. He says, you must probably feel an emotional pain that Mama, your mother, was not buried in Ma'aras HaMachpelah, where I'm going to be buried, and where all the matriarchs and patriarchs are buried. But there's a reason I buried in Beis Lechem, he says. God told me to. Remember, God spoke to Yaakov, said, bury Rachel here. Why? There will be a time when the Jews will be exiled from Israel, and they will be escorted in chains out of the land of Israel. And as they're about to leave the borders, Beis Lechem, the grave, the tomb of Rachel will be there, and they will find solace and comfort at her gravesite when they leave. Here's one of the sources of why we pray at the gravesite of the great sages, the scholars, the saints, the matriarchs, and the patriarchs. So this is the story. And why is it called Pulasecha? What did she do? She sacrificed herself. Yaakov says, your mother is like you. Where do you think you got your strength from? You inherited it from your mother. Who gave you your fortitude to be in slavery and fight Potiphar's wife? You could have just given in to her. I'm not obligated to be moral. I'm not obligated to follow Torah. Look what they did to me. Who gave you your strength? You got it from your mama. God knew that Rachel could be buried alone and that she would want this for herself because a mother cares first and foremost for her children. Which mother doesn't sacrifice for her child? All the millions of stories of how mothers gave up for their children, the Yiddish mama. When Rachel was put there to be a source of strength for all generations, until this day we go there and we daven by her. People go there for fertility and health and all kinds of problems. To her place. And Rachel would want to be, if Yaakov would have said to her, Rachel, do you want to be buried with me? Or do you want to be in a place where your children need you? What do you think she would have said? I want to be where my children need me. So this is the quintessential Yiddish mama. Rachel, Pulasecha, she sacrificed her regal spot, so to speak, where she could have been in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah with all her sister-in-laws, the other matriarchs and patriarchs, and have a little company, because it says after passing the souls converse, but yet she's alone because that's where her children needed her. So when Yosef heard this from his father, how do you think he felt? He felt the emotional trauma, the pain, that maybe his mother wasn't put where she should have been put. He realized, wow. So his father dealt with his emotional pain. That's a father also. He cannot leave this world without telling his son the true story of what really happened to his mother. And now comes the clincher. So Yosef hears the story, and of course he's very relieved and happy. How could he not be? Hearing that his mother he knew his mother was great, but his mother, wow, top of the world. And he now brings his two sons closer to get blessed. So Menashe is the older one. He puts the older one on one side of his father. Ephraim is the younger one. And he puts his younger son by his father. So he expects his father to put his right hand on the older one, his left hand on the younger one, and he's going to bless them. But what does he do? Who knows? He switches. He now puts his right hand on the younger one and his left hand on the older one. So Joseph, thinking his father already couldn't see well, he was an elderly man, so he thinks his father doesn't see well. So he says, no, Daddy, you got it wrong. Menashe is the older one. Ephraim is the younger one. Switch your hands back. So Yaakov says, no. And he gives them the blessing that parents bless their children Friday night and at other times in their lives. The famous blessing, you should be like the children Menashe and Ephraim, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, and so on. So what went on here? Why did he switch his hands? Shouldn't the older one be the right hand, the younger one the left hand? So here again, Chassidus explains, it's never what you think. We're programmed that right is right, left is right. It is not so good. My grandmother used to tell me, you're a lefty? You're a lefty? How could you be a lefty? She told me, old wives, Baba Mises. In the olden days, it's not based in Torah, as we know. And I used to give back to my grandmother, go, Baba, I don't have to put on tefillin, so don't worry. But it's a joke, because what happens? If you're a righty, you put tefillin on your left hand. If you're a lefty, you put tefillin on the right hand. So thousands and thousands of men put on tefillin on the right hand. They're lefty, my own son included. But in my Baba's days, it was considered, I don't know what, a disability. Ridiculous, right? But it's not. They say, as a matter of fact, if you switch your child's natural predisposition, you mess with their brain stuff. You mess with their brain. Never, never. If your child is a lefty, let your child be a lefty. If your child is a righty, is a righty. So you're messing with the brain transmissions. It's documented. So that was my joke with my Baba, but I never felt bad. I used to laugh when my Baba would tell me that. But anyway, so he switches out the hands. Why? So I'm going to jump ahead. There's many simple explanations, but I'm going to give you what I love this explanation. And it all boils down to their names also. Why did he call his older son Menashe? When Joseph was living in Egypt, right, he marries Otznat, he gives birth. Why did he call his older son Menashe and his younger son Ephraim? And this was very prevalent in those days. They gave names according to their feelings. And, like Leah gave her son, God saw my pain, and so on. So Menashe comes from the word, believe it or not, forgetful. You forget. So Yosef called his son Menashe, God made me forget my toil, my pain, my anguish. You remember, he went through a lot of anguish and pain. When he gave birth and he's now on the top of the world, God made me forget my pain. So that's Menashe. Interesting name, right? The second name, Ephraim, anybody know what that means? It comes from the word to be fruitful, multiply, peru uravu, be fruitful and multiply. God made me grow. God made me fruitful. God made me multiply. God gave me abundance. So his first son, God made me forget my pain, my toil. The second son, God made me fruitful. Now let me ask you a question. Let's build up to the answer. I come to you in a beautiful white dress, beautiful. And someone had kissed me on my collar and they left a little lipstick. I come over to you, go like, hi, what are you going to say to me? Freida, did you realize there's lipstick on your white dress, right? Isn't that what you, and by the way, it happened to me. I was wearing a beautiful white dress. Somebody kissed me. And my mother saw me and said, Shrey, did you realize there's lipstick on your collar? And I'm like, okay, Ma, but do you like my dress?
Yeah.
Right? We tend to first notice the negative. It's not even, it's almost intuitive. Like someone comes over to you, I hold up a beautiful white paper. Here, I'm going to show you an experiment. I hold up a plain white sheet of paper, but in the middle, there's a teeny, teeny dot. What are you going to notice? You're going to say to me, Freida, what are you going to say? What's that dot? Right? Yeah. You're going to know, you're going to hone in on the dot. You're going to hone in. It's our nature to do that. You're going to hone in. Your kid gets straight A's, 1 C. You're not going to say, oh, Joey, wow, straight A's. You say, why'd you get a C? What happened? One, right? We tend to hone in on the negative. Menashe. We tend to hone in on our own, also on ourselves. We're always hard on ourselves. I should have done this. I could have done that. Why am I so stupid? Why am I so dumb? Why didn't I realize? Why did I go there? I should have gone there. Why did I say no? I should have said yes. We are very hard on ourselves. It's our nature. It's human nature to always hone in first on the negative, on the Menashe. And what does this come from? It comes from forgetting who you are, forgetting about your soul, forgetting about your relationship with God. We are forgetful about our positive, our goodness, our assets. We're always looking, saying, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with her? What's that spot on the wall? We tend to always focus on the negative by nature. It's a training to teach yourselves to start looking first for the positive, right? Yeah. And I'm talking about myself, by the way. I don't know, you might be very different than me, but we tend to focus on, it's nature, it's human nature. And this causes in ourselves a lot of fragmentation because we tend to focus on the negative. We tend to forget sometimes who we are, what our strengths are. And that's Menashe. What's Ephraim? Ephraim is the opposite, the positive, the connectiveness, seeing the straight A's and going, wow, straight A's, wow, amazing. Okay, you think to yourself, my kid got a C, I don't have to say anything. Everything else is an A. So Yaakov is telling his son, Yosef, we're switching things around here. We're not going to first focus on the Menashe in life. We're going to first focus on the Ephraim and then focus on the Menashe. By focusing first on what's good about your life, what you have, the good in your children, the good in your spouse, the good in your neighbors, the good in your whatever the good, the positive, the assets, focus on first. That works together when in our lives we also have those moments of insecurities, lack of faith, lack of motivation, lack of connectiveness. What do I need all this for? Who needs to be Jewish? Who needs a soul? Leave me alone. So if you first put your right hand, which means your emphasis on the positive, on who you are, your assets, and everything around you, you start looking with a right attitude, a positive attitude, and a Ephraim attitude, then when you have those moments when you're Menashe, which because we're all going to have it, the Ephraim attitude will outweigh or get you back on track with the Menashe. So Kabbalah Hasidus explains, he switched his hands to show us you got to think of things differently. Change your paradigm. Change the way you approach life. You think right away, right hand on the older, left hand on the younger. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily so. Actually, the opposite is true. Actually, the opposite is true. So Hasidus explains when Yaakov tells Yosef we're switching it around, even Yosef doesn't realize. He says, Papa, you're doing it wrong. He says, no, I'm not. This is precisely how I'm doing it. This is precisely. And then he explains to him, he says, why am I doing this way? And now we're going to the simple explanation. He says, because from Ephraim, the younger son will come Joshua, the leader who will bring the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael. So, but Gadol Mimeno, he tells Yosef, Ephraim gets the blessing with the right hand because from him will come the greater person, Yeshua, who will take the Jews into the land of Israel. But Gadol Mimenu, now going back to Hasidus, means something else. Mimeno, from Ephraim, you can conquer Menashe. Gadol Mimenu, how do you grow in life? How do you prosper? How do you flourish? By starting with the Ephraim attitude in life. From the Ephraim, from the attitude of looking first at the good, the assets in life, the wealth of life, you will grow through that. That's how you grow. So where Menashe and Ephraim become one. Yes, you're going to have the Menashe moments. You forget who you are. You're looking at everything from the bad. It's terrible. This is terrible. Everything's terrible, terrible, terrible. But from the Menashe, Yagdil Mimena, from the Ephraim, will lead you to, in a sense, grow and prosper and flourish. You need both, in other words. Okay? Excuse me, you know what? I think I said it wrong. From the Menashe comes the Ephraim, sorry. From the moments of sometimes from the moments of being challenged and forgetful comes to the moments when you feel the Ephraim, the positive. Sorry, I switched it around. So you need both, he's saying. You need both. Because he could have said, I can only bless Ephraim, but you need the Menashe. Right? You need the Menashe because it's the moments when we're vulnerable, open to challenges and feeling down and out that allow us also our greatest growth. Because if a person, everything is smooth sailing, right? And everything is fruitful, Ephraim, great, perfect, there's no growth there. So you have Menashe, you have moments of forgetting who you are, forgetting how you should be happy, forgetting about your wealth, forgetting about what's good in life. Right? You need those moments because that allows us to grow into Ephraim, to appreciating what we have. So you need both. So it's a combo to allow us to prosper. So, but we start with Ephraim, the right hand. You have the left hand, Menashe, but we should change it. First see the white page, then see the dot. First see the beautiful dress, then see the lipstick stain. First see the straight A's, and then later maybe you could discuss why she got a C or he got a C. So treasure first the positive moments before you hone in on the negative moments in your life. So this is the story. And then Yagdim Amena, from that will bring you the greatest growth, the greatest achievements, because it's from Ephraim that Joshua is his great-grandson and takes the Jewish people into the land of Israel. That's the Peshat. That's like the simple explanation why he split his hands, because he says to Yosef, from the younger son will come the greater achievement, Joshua, Yoshua. But Chassidus says you need both. You need the Ephraim and you need the Menashe. Does anybody have any questions before we conclude?
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's very good.
I'm sorry that I got into a little of a mix-up in my, see, I'm a lefty, so I think backwards. My mother could never teach me how to knit because I'm a lefty, so she couldn't, she's a righty, she couldn't show me the right way because my mother used to knit beautiful, 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 beautiful sweaters. So I want to conclude with a beautiful story that I read. We have another minute? Yeah, good. That I heard, actually. So it was during the Holocaust, and there was a family that was taken from Lublin to the concentration camps, and seemingly were all killed and cremated by the Nazis. But there's one son, his name was, I wrote it down, his name was Naftali Tzvi. Naftali Tzvi managed to escape, and he was rescued by some Catholic nuns. And what ended up being, by the age of 13, he was baptized, and they saw in him a brilliance. The more they taught him, the more he knew. And when he went into adulthood, he became a Catholic priest in Lublin. His name was Yaakov Tzvi. I said his name, right?
Naftali?
Yeah, Naftali? No, Yaakov. His name was Yaakov.
Oh, Yaakov.
The Catholic priest, Jewish name was Yaakov Tzvi Grinner, Gri. Now, when he became a Catholic priest, they called him Gregory Pavlovsky, Pavlovski, Pavlovsky. He changed his name to Gregory Pavlovsky. You can't have a Catholic priest being called Yaakov Tzvi Grinner. Now, for some reason, he had published some kind of paper, and it ended up in the land of Israel, and his brother, Chaim, who he thought was killed in the concentration camps, reads this, sees this picture, and he tells a story in this article that his real name was Yaakov Tzvi. He was taken in by the nuns in Lublin, in Poland, and he became a Catholic priest, and is Gregory Pavlovsky. So his brother Chaim contacts him. He says, Yaakov Tzvi, you're my brother. So he decides he's going to make Aliyah to Israel. But before he makes Aliyah, he goes to the Lublin, one of the Lublin Jewish cemeteries, and he creates a monument for his family, his parents and his sister. His mother was Miriam, who was wiped out by the Nazis. And it says there, in memory of my family members, he lists his family members, and then he buys the plot near that plot for himself. And he makes a monument for himself, Yaakov Tzvi Grinner, called Gregory Pavlovsky. And who he is, and so on and so forth. And he wants to be buried there when he dies. He makes Aliyah to Israel. He becomes a chief bishop in Jaffa, and he eats matzah on Pesach. He doesn't eat treif, and he does certain things like a regular Jew, but he is a Catholic bishop.
Wow.
And he learns to speak perfect Hebrew. Anyway, crazy story. There's a Rabbi Shalom Elul who goes to Lublin on a Polish trip with his congregants. He wants to show them all the places where the Jews were, this history of the Jews. And he comes to the cemetery and he sees the two monuments, one that says in memory of the family, and the other one that says, my name is Yaakov Tzvi Grinner. I am a Catholic priest. I sacrificed my Judaism to save my life, and I want to be buried here. And my name is Gregory Pavlovsky. And he sees this monument of the priest. So he says, when he goes back to Israel, he thinks to himself, I want to go meet this bishop. He goes, he meets him. They become good friends. He hangs up a mezuzah on his door, and they learn together. And before he dies at age 91, they interview him. They go, explain us this whole story. It doesn't make you Jewish, but you're a Catholic. He says, listen, I am Jewish. I was born a Jew. I had a bris. I was named. My parents were Jewish. I'm Jewish. But however, there is a loyalty to the people who saved me, the Catholic nuns, and I feel very thankful to them. And so I am a Catholic bishop. And I eat matzah on Pesach and the whole thing. But he said, I do know that in essence, I am a Jew. And so I want to be buried as a Jew with the Chevra Kadisha, in the proper Jewish burial, in the Jewish cemetery, because that's who I truly am. And at age 91, he passes away, and Shalom Elul takes his whole yeshiva boys, and they travel with the coffin back to Lublin, and they give him a Jewish burial. And they say Kaddish for the entire year for this guy, Yaakov Tzvi Grinner, Gregory Pavlovsky. This just happened. Why do I share the story with you? Because, when it comes to being a Jew and having a Jewish neshama, doesn't matter. You could be even a chief bishop in Jaffa. But at the end of the day, at the end of your life, where is your soul? Where is the essence of your soul return? It goes always back to who you truly are. And it doesn't matter what people prophesize, because a person can change their life even at the last moment of their life. At the end of his life, he said, I need to be buried in Lublin, in a Jewish cemetery. As who I was born, as a Jew, I will die as a Jew. So when we study Torah, when we study the stories of the matriarchs and the patriarchs, Menashe and Ephraim, and Yaakov wanted to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, it all ties into, for eternity, that a Jew is a Jew is a Jew, all the way back from the matriarchs and the patriarchs. And if you notice in the story, Avraham had Yitzchak, right? But he had a Ishmael from Hagar, right? Yitzchak had Yaakov, but he had Esav. Yaakov, whose name is changed to Yisrael, had 12 sons and one daughter. No Ishmael, no Esav. Every one of them remained true to their father and to God and to Torah. And that's why we're called B'nai Yisrael, not B'nai Avraham, not B'nai Yitzchak, not B'nai someone else. Yaakov is the quintessential combination of the Avraham and the Yitzchak. Yaakov took Avraham and Yitzchak and he internalized that. And from that came that the Jews are called the children of Jacob, which is B'nai Yisrael, but Israel, because remember, his name was changed from Yaakov, from heel, to Israel, one who is the Prince of God and has conquered the godliness within himself. That's why we're called B'nai Israel. Because at the end of the day, Yaakov passes away, but his sons, all 12, and his daughter, are true to who they have to be. Yes, they made mistakes. Yes, there were challenges. But at the end of the day, all 12 sons are united. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And Yaakov responds, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusay L'Olam Va'ed. The Jewish people are eternal. Those words are the words that carry on forever. And that's why a Catholic bishop, Pavel, I can't even remember, Greg Pavlovsky, at the end of his day, he is Yaakov Tzvi buried in a Jewish cemetery near his family. And that's really the story of the Jewish people. We rise, what we call, I know it's a cliche, we rise from the ashes. But this is life. This is what actually happens. And so I want to wish everybody a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos. And